Okay, great. So welcome everybody. This is the ANA application tips and Q&A webinar. I'm pleased that everybody is able to join us today. For those of you that are just coming off the ANA grantee meeting, I hope you all had a productive time there. We certainly enjoyed working with and presenting presentations and learning about all the different projects and that people are working on and sharing best practices. So today we're going to be covering basically some of the, not the entire application process, but we're going to be covering more some of the pitfalls of the application process. So these are going to be things that have tripped people up in the past and that have affected their timely submission, for example. So that'll be the primary focus today. A little bit about the Alaska Region TTA Center. We are hosting this webinar, and it has monthly national webinars that each of the TTA regions host, and we rotate each month. So, like I said, I'm the regional director, and I have a staff of 3 in the Alaska region. We've kind of merged some of the responsibilities. My training technical assistance manager is Angela Camus, and our technology EIH manager is Charles Peel, who is currently in Canada competing in a basketball tournament. So I wish him luck. So what we do, the regional TTA centers, we provide free training. We provide project planning and development training, pre-application training, and post-award training. And we also provide free technical assistance under our contracts. And that includes project planning and development assistance, which helps you on the front of your project to help you scope the project out and address some of your capacity issues if you are a new organization or we also provide pre-app technical assistance, and what that is once your application is 75% complete, or roughly 75% complete, you've got your rough draft together. We have a team, each region has both our core staff and a team of consultants that we assign to help go through your application thoroughly and help you identify areas that you can strengthen that application so that hopefully you'll have a better chance when you submit it of being competitive. And then we also assist grantees once they're funded. As well. Sorry about that. So the Administration for Native Americans promotes self-sufficiency for Native Americans by providing discretionary grant funding for community-based projects, as well as technical assistance to eligible tribes and Native organizations. And ANA's vision is Native communities are thriving. Some of our upcoming webinars in the next couple of months, financial tools and resources for low-income individuals. That will be on February 26th, and that's going to be hosted by the Eastern Region TTA Center. How to start a language program, which is March 12th, being hosted by the Pacific Region. And how to sustain a language program, other funding sources, March 26th, hosted by the Eastern Region. So just a sidebar comment, I've talked to some of the people that just came back from the grantee meeting, and particularly with regards to the language, some of our new applicants, at least here in Alaska, were really excited to learn about a lot of the different approaches that are being taken right now. And so we've talked to a few people, and they were definitely energized for their new language projects. So today's goals are to understand the requirements for filing an exemption from an electronic submission. So ANA does allow for paper submission, but you have to file that exemption. And I'll talk briefly about what you have to do if you want to go that route. We're going to talk about a little bit about the done SAM and Grants.gov registration process, and then we'll spend quite a bit of time in the Grants.gov package going over some of the ins and outs of filling out the Grants.gov package and assembling your documents. And then lastly, we'll have some general Q&A. And the way we're going to handle the Q&A is my moderator, Jesse, is going to be tracking any questions that are posed in the chat box, and then we'll address those at the tail end to the best of our ability. Okay. So right now we have several opportunities out, funding opportunity announcements that are out for ANA's programs. We have the Environmental Regulatory Enhancement FOA that's out, the Native American Language Preservation and Maintenance FOA, the Esther Martinez Immersion FOA, and the SEDS FOAs, as well as the SEEDS. So all of those are due March 4th, which is a few weeks away. And then we have the Native Asset Building FOA and the Alaska SEDS FOA, which are due at a different date. Those two programs applications are due on the 25th. So those came out a little bit later and are due a little bit later as well. Okay, so starting off with some of the issues that people had getting through the review stage in the last funding cycle. Number one, there were a number of applications in the last cycle that were not reviewed because one of the disqualification factors for applicants that are not tribes or that are not Native Alaskan villages is to provide assurance of community representation of your board of directors. So basically, if you're a nonprofit, you need to provide documentation that your nonprofit board is representative of the community. And in the funding opportunity announcements or FOAs, there's 4 categories of community representation that you need to address with your board members. Okay, those 4 categories are a majority, or 51% of your board members need to be members of federally or state recognized tribes. They need to be persons eligible to be a participant or a beneficiary of the project to be funded. They need to be persons who are recognized by the eligible community to be served as having a cultural relationship with that community, or persons considered to be Native American and Native Pacific Islander, either under 45 CFR 133610 or under the Native American Programs Act. And then I just want to clarify one thing. So actually, you don't have to meet all 4 of these requirements, but you have to meet one of these requirements in order for that board member to be considered representative of the community. So you have 4 different ways that you can do that, and you need to provide that documentation. So here's a suggestion on how you might do that. You need to list out the board member name, the title, and which of those 4 categories that particular board member meets as far as the criteria for assuring ANA that they're representative of the community. You might also want to include organizational charts, meeting minutes, and articles of incorporation to document your board makeup. So this is just an example of in addition to the table I just showed you, another way you can also list out each of your board of directors. So I just want to reiterate that this requirement, it's a threshold requirement. It's if you're a nonprofit applying and you do not provide this documentation, then your application may be disqualified not reviewed. If you're a tribe or an Alaska village, however, you're not required to provide evidence of your board of directors being representative of the community. So hopefully that's clear. And we have a comment from, I just want to point this out since it's an AMA staff, to be sure to read the eligibility requirements in the FOA. And that, I think, I was going to hold off on the questions, but there was a question about eligibility. So we'll address that some more. Okay, so here in Alaska, in particular, we have a huge issue with broadband, the lack of broadband access. In fact, some statistics came out, and we were ranked pretty much at the bottom of the list. I think there are some territories in the Pacific that are with us as far as the status of our lack of high-speed connectivity. So putting the Grants.gov packages together with the 3 files that we suggest, and I'll talk about that some more, those files can end up being quite large, and a lot of times if you're submitting from some of our remote locations, the internet just cannot support that. So if you're considering requesting a waiver for the electronic application submission, then here's the deal. You've got to do that 14 days before the deadline. So if you are looking at the March 4th deadline, you got to calculate back 14 days. So basically, there's a few days until you get this in. And the way that you request this exemption is you need to document one of 2 reasons for the exemption. You need to document that you have the lack of internet access or internet connectivity, or that you have limited computer capacity that prevents upload of large files at Grants.gov. So if you can document one of those 2 things, then you need to put that in a formal request, and you can email that request to electronic app exemption at acf.hhs.gov, or you can submit the written request. However, if you submit the written request, you might want to FedEx it because you're running out of time. So probably email request at this point. Okay, so that's the requirements for requesting the exemption. And if you end up going with the paper, if you get the exemption submitted on time and approved, then there's some additional requirements for submitting paper applications. And basically, the paper applications have to be received by the deadline, 4:30 p.m., I believe, which is earlier than if you file electronically. And of course, you've got to factor in a week or 2, at least coming from Alaska, to ship it ahead of time to meet the deadline. So, so that's the downside of submitting via paper if you get the approval, is you don't have as much time to put that together now. So again, the deadlines, if you're going to work backwards and figure out when your exemption request is due, the deadlines for SED, SEEDS, ERE, EMI, and preservation and maintenance is March 4th. And for the Alaska SEDS and the NOP, it's March 25th. I don't recall if I mentioned it, but the Alaska SEDS is a new program this year. We're very grateful that is in place again. Actually, it was previously a program for I think 1984 to 2010. So we're very thankful that that's back again. And then there again is the deadline. So paper applications 4:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and electronic submission 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But we will talk about that that 11:59 deadline a little bit more further on, because if you wait till the very last minute, you could have some serious challenges, and may not, even though you think you've submitted it, there's a few additional steps that could ultimately result in it not being timely. So I'll talk about that a little bit more. we're going to change the focus here now, and hopefully everybody has gotten together your DUNS and SAM and Grants.gov usernames and passwords. You're all squared away. But if not, I'll go ahead and review these three things briefly and make sure you know how to get help. Because these are all required in order to apply for ANA funds. So you got three things to submit your application electronically. You have to have your DUNS number. You have to have a SAM account, which is System for Award Management. And for those of you that have been in the grants business for quite a while, that used to be the CCR, and it became the SAM. And then lastly, you have to have a Grants.gov account, because ultimately you will be submitting your application using the through your Grants.gov account. Okay. So we've actually we have a complete webinar on the whole process of getting registered in each of these, and it goes into great detail on each registration process. So all of our past webinars that are resources for you now can be accessed from the National ANA website. If you go to the resource library, resources, and for this particular webinar that I'm suggesting, if you want to get an in-depth overview of the registration process for SAM and DUNS and Grants.gov, it's called How to Make Sure Your Organization is Registered to Submit an ANA Grant Application Online. And that was produced March 5th, 2014, so it's fairly recent. So if you just type that into the search box on the National Resources page, then you will be able to pull that up and review that as well. But briefly, a DUNS number is like the initial step. You have to have a DUNS number for your organization. It doesn't cost you anything. It's also unique to a specific location. So it's actually possible for an organization that has multiple offices in different geographic areas to have more than one DUNS number. So that's something you might want to keep in mind. The other thing is maybe you don't know if you've got the DUNS number. If you don't know, you just search for it, and it's possible that somebody has already registered you from the past. The DUNS website is listed here at www.dnb.com, and the help desk number there and the business registration team numbers are there for you if you need to get squared away with your DUNS number. This is the first step in order to even get registered in SAM, and ultimately in Grants.gov you need to have that DUNS number. Secondly, once you have your DUNS number, then you can go into the System for Award Management and register in this system. Now there's different types of registrations that you can do, because this is a federal-wide system, and it covers not only grantor or grantees, but also federal contractors such as myself, 3-star. So if you've never registered in SAM, you're going to want to register as a grantee for receiving grants. And there's a checklist. If you go to the help page here on the help desk website, they have some very straightforward, simple guides that will walk you through that process. So you want to look for the one for grantees. And lastly, once you've registered in SAM, and by the way, be sure to log in, make sure that you are current, that your password's updated, and also that that you've updated your registration, because that's an annual process that you have to do. So just be sure to check that you're current in SAM. Once you've got that squared away, then you can get into Grants.gov, and hopefully by now you've already got an account with Grants.gov. this is an area that you want to make sure you've got the current authorized organization representative. Just a second. Okay, sorry about that. Because when you submit your application, all the emails are going to go to the authorized organization representative. And what we've seen in the past is we've had quite a few instances where that person either changed or was out of the community when the application was being submitted, or out of contact. And if any validation errors were found and emails sent to that effect, unless that person is looking for those, the individual that's applying may not know. So get in contact with that person in your Grants.gov account, make sure that everything is current. The help desk for Grants.gov is 800-518-4726, and the Grants.gov page is Grants.gov. So there's another resource here that you can also use, and it's a self-service web portal. It's a knowledge base where if you've got questions about individual Grants.gov topics, you can just go to the Grants Grants portal and search for your topics there. Okay, so now this is where it starts to get interesting. So there are a few issues that you need to be aware of when you are getting ready for submitting and preparing for this whole process. So number one, Grants.gov, it really is designed at this point for Internet Explorer. It can be used in other browsers, and if you see here as far as the web browser support, Google Chrome, Apple Safari, and Mozilla Firefox are all supported. But Grants.gov basically certifies Microsoft Internet Explorer version 9 to be fully compatible with the whole Grants.gov process and system. So it's not that you can't use the other browsers, and I'm pretty sure that others have. We have. But to be certain, you might want to use the Internet Explorer, the one that they actually certify. The other software issue that you need to be thinking about, not just your web browser that you're using, Internet Explorer, but also the whole Grants.gov package is an Adobe software package, and you have to have a compatible version of Adobe Reader in order to avoid any problems or minimize any problems with errors or validation errors cropping up. So if you go to the Grants.gov software compatibility site, I've pulled this up on the screen here, you can check out which versions of Adobe Reader are compatible. And for Windows 7, Grants.gov is recommending version 11.0.2. The other thing that's interesting with this is if you have different computers in your office and folks are using different versions of Adobe Reader, you don't want to be passing around the Grants.gov package. Everybody needs to be using the same version of Adobe Reader, or that can also create issues. So the self-service web portal, actually I went in here this morning, and there's a little test. If you search for Adobe Reader compatibility under solution, that give you a long URL. You can paste that into your web browser and see if the current version of Adobe Reader that you're using is actually compatible. And if it's not, then you need to upgrade your Adobe Reader software. Okay, so we've assumed you've got your DUNS number, your SAM registrations all current, your Grants.gov registrations current, and now you're going to go in and download your application package from Grants.gov, www.grants.gov. Grants.gov. You can find it by clicking on the search grants, number 1, step 1, and then under the CFDA number, step 2, you just plug in the CFDA number for the program that you're applying for. So if you punch in the SEDS CFDA number 93.612, it'll actually pull up. There's several programs that fall under the SEDS. There's the SEDS, the SEEDS, the SEDS Alaska. All of those funding opportunity announcements will come up if you just search for 93.612. So that one there. Okay, so once you do that search, step 3 is to identify the actual program that you're going to apply for. So you want to be very careful here that you select the specific funding opportunity announcement that you're applying under. Like I said, when we punched in 93.612, we're just using this as an example. It pulls up 4 different SEDS programs that you could potentially apply for. So if we look at the SEDS one, the National SEDS, which is due March 4th, and you click on the blue hyperlink, it'll pull up the opportunity, step 4, and you can read the version history, full announcement, and the application package. So go to the application package and click on that, and it'll pull up the screen. This will be a synopsis of the package to download. Step 5, you'll want to put in your email address and confirm your email address. You don't have to, but if you want to be notified of any changes, any last minute changes, and there have been in the past, then you definitely want to do this. So I recommend you go ahead and put in your email and submit it. And then once you do that, you'll get to this screen, and you'll have 2 files here that you can download. So you need both of these files, and I'll go into more detail of what these files contain. But the package, this number 2, is the application package. That's where you're going to upload all your documents and everything. And number 1 is the application instructions. And in that, there are also a few forms that you might need as well. So be sure to download both of those. So this is what the application package looks like once you open it up. And this is for the SEDS, the National SEDS. So the first thing you want to do, of course, is you're going to want to save this file, because this is what you're going to be using to ultimately submit your application with. So click the save over here. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what's in these two Grants.gov PDFs that you can download. So the one that we just looked at a second ago was the application package, and this is the one that you use to, it's kind of like the mail carrier. It takes your whole application, all your attachments, and your forms that you either fill out within that PDF or that you attach to it. It sends it via Grants.gov to a site where you can then download it, and then Grants.gov is that's basically what the Grants.gov is used for, is to deliver it. The other one is the application instructions, and like I said, you definitely want to open this up and take a look at it, because it also talks about, it provides additional guidance. It's a supplement sort of to the FOA. It talks about the DUNS and SAM registration process and any systems issues. So there's a policy statement in there that you want to look at. If you end up having problems, technical problems with SAM or Grants.gov at the tail end, then this describes ACF's policy with regards to that. So you want to take a look at that. It also has additional instructions for some of the other forms and some additional forms as well. All right, so let's look at the elements of the application package. And this is just for the SEDS example. So if you open up that application package, you'll see that there's some mandatory forms as well as one optional form that's listed. And a few tips about the mandatory forms. These forms are filled out right within that PDF Grants.gov package. And some of the data is pre-populated, so if you fill out the 424 first, like the title of your project, your organization, and so on, that information will be will autofill or auto-populate some of the other forms as well. So we do recommend that you start with that SF424. If you see a field in yellow, it's a mandatory field and you have to fill it in. You'll get error messages popping up if the mandatory field is not filled in. And if it's not filled in, if a mandatory field is not filled in, you will be unable to submit the application. So one of the things to consider is to minimize or avoid using special characters when possible. I'll talk about in a slide or two from here some of the exceptions, but in general, most electronic systems don't do well with special characters. That's just something to keep in mind. The other thing is the software, the coding that is used for normal desktop Word is not compatible with HTML and other web-based code. So when you copy and paste from Word to Grants.gov, sometimes there's data that you don't see that's carried over with it, and it affects can impact your application process. So ideally, if you can avoid copying and pasting into the Grants.gov package, you're better off. Although I think Grants.gov is trying to insulate and avoid those problems, and I think that it's getting better at that. All right, so those are a few tips about these mandatory forms that you'll find in your Grants.gov package. So we're still looking at these mandatory forms. So what I want to point out is that the 424, if you click on that, it'll literally be right embedded in that package. So you fill that out there. The same thing with the Grants.gov lobbying form and the budget information 424 form, the project performance site location form. Those are embedded in that. But there's 3 unique forms in here that you're going to use to actually upload your written narrative and your written budget narrative and your supporting documentation. So I'm going to call out these 3 I'm going to call them attachment forms, and explain how to use these and what goes in them, because this is where you're going to be putting your content. All right, so there's 3 of them. There's the narrative attachment form, number 1. There's the budget narrative attachment form, number 2, and there's the other attachments form, 3. So I'll go each one of these in detail now. But before I do that, here's a few more tips about naming your attachment files, because like I showed on the previous screen here, these are attachment forms. So you're going to be attaching your files to these forms. So you want to consider how to name those files that you're going to be saving. So here's some tips. You want to avoid using more than 50 characters. You don't want to attach a file with the same file name. Generally, you want to avoid blank space or blank attachments. And preferably, you'll want to use the PDF file type. Now, the reason why is, although you can technically upload like an Excel file or a Word document, there's so many different versions of Word and Excel out there that they don't all when it opens, treat the file the same. You could end up with pages cut off, or your budget, if you've not properly formatted it to fit to a single page, it can spill over to the next page and just become a real mess on the export. So the best thing to be totally certain that the reviewers and AMA, when they look at your documents, that they're looking at them as you had seen them when you submitted it, is to use the PDF file format. Also, be certain that you do not encrypt or password protect any of the files that you're uploading. If you do, AMA won't be able to open them, and probably they won't get reviewed. Also, like I said before, try to avoid special characters. However, Grants.gov is, they're working on the programming, and they're starting to accept more and different types of special characters, including a space, brackets, tilde, percent signs, and so on. But I personally, to the greatest extent possible, would try to avoid any special characters. The other thing is the guidance in the FOA about what to name these files. It basically just says observe the file name conventions required by Grants.gov. So it's a little bit of a circular logic here. So there really isn't a specific way that you're instructed to name these, but this is a possible suggestion to put the name of your organization, underscore the name of the program you're applying for, and then the name of the attachment that you're putting together. So we're going to talk about and recommend or suggest that you have ultimately three consolidated PDF files, one being the project narrative, two being the budget narrative, and three being other attachments. So and then as far as the format, this is straight from the FOA, so you always want to refer to the FOA for all the ins and outs of this. This is just a kind of a high-level summary. It needs to be formatted 8.5 by 11-inch paper, 1-inch margins, Times New Roman, 12-point font, double-spaced, and a formula will be used to determine page length outside of these parameters. And if you exceed the page limit, which is 150 pages, the excess pages will be removed and not reviewed. There's a few exemptions from the double spacing, and these include the one-page abstract, table of contents, assurances and certifications, the standard forms, OMB approved forms, resumes, letters of support, third-party agreements, logic model, your proof of legal status and nonprofit status, tables, and your budget and budget justification. All right, so a tip on formatting. You want to, in your supporting documents, you want to be strategic with what you include. You want to be sure to include things that are relevant to and support your project narrative, and that they're targeted. Now, some of your attachments are excluded from the 150-page limit, and the exclusions include the required forms, any OMB approved and standard forms, any certifications, and if you're doing a project that requires a business plan, that is also exempt from the 150-page limit. All right, now, so earlier I said that you're going to have what we recommend ultimately three PDF files that you're going to consolidate and attach. So I want to go into detail now on each of those three attachments. The first one that I'm going to address or cover here is the project narrative attachment form. After I do that, I'll talk about the budget narrative and other attachments. But for now, let's talk about the project narrative attachment form. So what are you going to put in this, what are you going to upload into this or attach to this form? You're going to include project abstract, your table of contents, and then your project description, your narrative addressing the the application criteria, including the need for assistance, the outcomes expected, and your project approach. So those narratives, the table of contents, and the abstract is what we suggest you include in the project narrative attachment form. And further, what we suggest is rather than attaching these separately, that you combine all of these into one single PDF file and only upload that one file using this form here. So once you've saved your, the abstract, table of contents, and all your narrative elements, and then use the PDF tool to combine those into a PDF, and you've got that one file number 1, project narrative, then you're going to use this attachment form. You're going to click on Add Mandatory Project Narrative File, put in the file name, and this is what you're going to use to attach it to the Grants.gov package. So if you've got everything in one file, you won't need to use this down here. You should only use this one up here. All right, so that's the project narrative. We covered that. Now we're going to cover the budget narrative attachment form. So what you're going to include in this, and refer to the FOA always, the FOA requires you to have a budget summary and justification. The budget justification is a line item detail explaining the resources that you're requesting and using for the project. So like the previous attachment, you're going to combine and ultimately create one single PDF of your budget summary and justification, and you're going to upload it here. And one of the things that I didn't mention is for each of these 3 different files, we recommend that you number them. So the first one, project narrative, you would number 1 to whatever, maybe 50, whatever it is. And then for this second one, the budget narrative, we recommend that you start off, if the first section was 50 or ended in 50, then this would start with 51 and then to the end, so that you've got a sequential numbering of each of these 3 files. Okay, lastly, the third attachment that you're going to put together is for all other attachments. So this would include all of your other supporting documentation. Now that could include, depending on what type of entity you are, your community representation of board of directors, governing body support, proof of nonprofit status if that's applicable, your commitment of non-federal sources, job descriptions, resumes, support letters, and so on, as well as your business plan and indirect cost rate. So all of the other supporting documents for your application, you would combine, ideally, into a single PDF file, number 3, and use this here to attach that or upload it via this button. Okay, so to review, went through the 3 forms that we're using to attach your documents. I talked about what goes in the project narrative attachment form, budget narrative attachment form, and the other attachments forms. So now I'm going to just go into a couple of tips or issues with some of these other forms, like the 424 and the objective work plan, and just talk a little bit about some of the issues that we've seen people trying to fill those out. So I'll start with the 424. I'm going to move back to that. Okay, so just a couple of things on the 424 to keep in mind. Remember, like I said, it's going to pre-populate the other forms. You want to fill out this form first, and the 424 is where you put your year 1 budget numbers. So you wouldn't, if you're doing a 3-year project, You will not be combining all your federal combined requests and putting it here. You're only going to put in your year one federal request for here and your year one local match and your projected year one program income if you have any, for a combined total project cost for year one. That's what's going on to the 424. Second, on the 424A, this is a continuation. You would put here under the grant program, whichever program you're applying for. So if you're applying for the SEDS, like in the example we've been using so far, you put SEDS there, and the CFDA number, which for SEDS is 93.612. And then since this is a new request, you use these columns here. So under the federal E column, you would put your year one annual federal request, and then in the second column F, you would put your matching or your non-federal share, and then the form will auto calculate a total here. So that's just a couple things to keep in mind on that. And then, excuse me, on the continuing on section B of the 424A under budget categories, this would also be your year one budget numbers. Column one would be your federal budget for personnel, fringe, travel, etc. on down, all the different object class categories, and then the second column is your non-federal share, and then this will auto tally and show you the total combined for your year one. Section C, we're continuing on in the same form, your grant program, and here, this is your non-federal, so you're describing your non-federal resources. So you would put your match and then match you're receiving from others, and that would auto tally and show your total match. Section D, this is we're still talking year one budget numbers. So for this one, what you're going to do is you're going to forecast and project your cash flow. So a lot of times what people do is they just divvy this up by 4, and it looks kind of conspicuous. Since we know, like typically in the first quarter, a lot of times the hiring is delayed at least several weeks. And there may be startup costs like equipment or other things that are purchased in the first quarter. It just depends on the project. So really, you should think about how you anticipate spending your federal dollars so that this reflects your federal expenditures, and then your non-federal will correspond to that. That's your matching column. So these two combined will be your year one total project cost. And lastly, on the 424, this is a little bit odd, but you know, we've been talking about your year one budget, so you're probably wondering, okay, where do I show my year 2 and my year 3? Or if you're a seeds project or not, you've got potentially up to 5 years. So section E is your budget estimate of federal funds needed for the balance of your project. And the only thing that's kind of odd with this is that you're going to put your year 2 anticipated federal request under column B that says first, and your year 3 request under column C, which says second. All right, so that's doesn't seem intuitive, but that's basically what you're going to do. So if you've got a 3-year project, this is where you put your year 2 anticipated federal request from your year 3. All right, now let's talk about submitting. So you've gotten, hopefully you've gone through a pre-app training and really a PPD training. Even before that, you've formulated your project. You've put your narrative together. You've got, you know, all the things that you need in that narrative. Your community support, all your supporting documents, everything is all packaged up, and you are ready to start the submission process. Well, take a step back, and before you do that, we really recommend that you send that package or those documents to your TA provider and have them do a technical review with you. That's free. Each region can do that for you. So we recommend that you do that. We also recommend that you use the application checklist in the FOA to ensure that you've included all the required documentation and you've addressed all the FOA criteria. So we're in the Alaska region. We're not off the coast of Baja California. Sometimes we wish we had the heat though, but and Pacific's not in the Gulf. Well, we're off to the side there, but anyway. All right, so continue on. Before you submit, after you've attached everything, hopefully everybody's been using the same version and the correct version of Adobe Reader. You want to check your application for errors, so you just click on this check package for errors, and that will tell you if you have any errors that are going to create problems for you when you submit. So there's 3 steps in the Grants.gov submission process. You're gonna, after you've checked for errors and you're gonna save and submit, you need to log in. The AOR needs to log in, and then you're going to sign and submit the application. And then lastly, as that's uploading, you'll get a confirmation screen with the tracking number. So a couple things to keep in mind. We have seen where once you hit that submit, it can sit idle for several minutes. Now, if you're still unfortunately having to use dial-up and you didn't get your waiver for electronic or exemption for electronic submission, you're talking maybe 125 minutes or longer. But even on the road system here, not all of our internet is all that speedy. It can take at least a couple minutes, and oftentimes on the road system I've seen it take as much as 10 minutes. So whatever you do, be patient, and once you hit that save and submit button, don't use the cancel button or it will create problems for you. So let it take its time, run its course to upload all your documents, especially if you know that you have large, massive files that you've attached. But if you do run into problems and it appears that it's frozen indefinitely, then you might get on the phone with Grants.gov and find out what's going wrong with your application submission. Once you've gone through that process of saving and submitting, and it's you get your confirmation screen, you're going to get 3 emails that you're going to be looking for, and these are sent to the AOR. So there's the receipt email, and then there's the validation email, and ultimately the agency retrieval email. So the first email is just that that Grants.gov has received the application. The validation email is that everything is okay with the package. If there's validation problems, you'll have 24 to 48 hours to correct. So here's the deal. I was talking about the 11:59 deadline. If you submit this and there's validation errors, you run the risk of, if you have to resubmit, of not meeting the deadline. So really, you should be doing this several days before that deadline to ensure that you don't have any issues. So again, here's the Grants.gov help desk. They're available 24/7, except for federal holidays. The phone number is 1-800-518-4726. Now, a few other things. If you have encountered problems that you believe are tied to the electronic submission, ACF has a policy on federal systems issues. And systems issues are technical problems with federal systems that prevent an applicant from completing their application by the 11:59 p.m. deadline. It does not include, if your server crashes or the power. Well, I don't know. But basically, your own. If there's problems with your own computers, that's not considered a system issue. It has to be something intrinsic to SAM or Grants.gov. You need to document and report immediately any problems that you encounter within 24 hours of the deadline. Also, if you have waited till the last minute to register, that is not going to be considered a system issue. If you have problems tied to your late registration, that likely will not be considered a system issue. So the ACF policy is in the application instructions. You can also look at it online. So be sure you do that. Okay, so that's those are some of the technical issues from the application process. I know we're bumping up on the hour, but we wanted to take some general questions. And the first one, I think, representative from answered, and that is this grant for nonprofit only? So there's eligibility described in each of the FOAs, so you want to refer to that. AA is unique in terms of programs that serve Native communities, and that the eligibility is, in my opinion, pretty broad. There's a lot of different types of entities that are eligible. So take a look at that. And yes, we will have a download. We'll have a copy of this PowerPoint. So do we have any other general questions? And if so, can you please type it in the chat box, and like I said, we'll do our best to answer those questions. Okay, if you have questions that you want to ask, I'm responding to. Can we contact you after this PowerPoint? So I would suggest that you call your TA Center to, if you have technical questions, because we all are staffed up to be able to respond to you. Okay, I'm not sure. Let me find the map here. This is the map of the TA centers, and the eastern region is kind of unique because usually it includes the Dakotas, Kansas, Oklahoma, which are not usually considered eastern states. But anyway, they fall within the eastern region. The regional director for the eastern region is Rondell. And if you fall within these states here, the regional director is Dr. Iris Prettypaint. And then I'm the regional director for Alaska. So this is, and Jesse just put up the URL to the regions map with all the phone numbers and everything are on that link. So while we're waiting for a couple more questions, I just want to say that I know here in Alaska we have some organizations that are trying to put together applications. Some are sort of on the fence. We really encourage you, if you've got your project description, community support and your other elements, that you try to submit your application, because if you do that, even if you don't get funded the first round, each of the TA centers will be able to spend some time with you to review your application once it comes back with the comments from the review panel process, and then that will help you to strengthen that application. So it's good to get your application in. Just waiting for any other questions. Again, if you have a question, type it in the chat box. So I haven't covered every single form that's in the Grants.gov package. We mainly wanted to focus on the ones that have created issues for people. So I just wanted to clarify that. As far as getting your application reviewed, I can really only speak for the Alaska region as far as how late you can wait. The problem is if you wait till like the last week, it's very difficult for us to give you your full 16 hours, especially when we're bumping up against the deadlines. So, if you can get your application in for review at least a couple weeks, sooner the better, then you'll be assured that the TA providers will have enough time to devote to reviewing that. And I see that Kyung is reviewing or is typing. He's the regional director for the Pacific region. In practice, in reality, we, at least the Alaska region, we've processed ETA right up to the wire, and we have found even a quick review of an hour or less, sometimes we can find things that will improve your score. So. Okay, I'm just waiting for a few more. The webinar will be posted in less than 2 weeks. We'll try to get, because this is the deadlines are coming up, we'll try to get this posted sooner. So, do we have any other questions? Okay, there's a question about an activity such as annual training. So I would say yes, you would put that, since your OWP is covering each year of your project, and because that training is recurring, then I would include that as an activity in your second year OWP. Okay, you guys are letting me off easy now. I was worried I was going to get some really tough questions, so I'll just wait another minute. Any other questions out there? Okay. Okay, on the ERE, what I recommend for that, by the way, there's a, if you're not familiar, at least with the Alaska Native villages and tribal governments that operate the EPA IGAP program, some of those are actually able to use that as matching, even though they're federal. It's the one unique instance in which you can't use federal All the other programs require non-federal. We've done AA and some of the, including ourselves, we've done some grantee highlights that have dealt or that have described some of the ERE projects. So I would go to the resources and search for some of the environmental webinars that have been done, because there's some really interesting projects around the country in the ERE program. So that's in response to Joseph. All right. Okay, well, I think we'll go ahead and wrap this up now. So we appreciate it if you fill out the the evaluation questionnaire that Jesse sent out, and I wish everybody luck with your applications. So keep up the good work, and we hope here in the Alaska region and all the other regions, we hope to see a lot of your applications come in for the TA review. So be sure to allow some time to do that. All right. Guyana, everybody, this is Anthony, Regional Director for the Alaska region. We're going to be signing off now. So thanks for attending.